Greetings. This is Honolulu Blue from HB Cruising. I would like to tell you about the most excellent adventure I recently had on the McDonald LaBelle Cruise on the Norwegian Pearl. I booked this cruise about a year ago mostly because of the headline performers, Michael McDonald and Patti LaBelle, but there were also other reasons pushing me in the direction of this cruise. I had never sailed on NCL before and I was curious about how the experience would be. I had never sailed on a cruise that was shorter than 5 days before. This was only 3 days and I was curious about how that experience would be. I had never sailed on a cruise with the Jazz Cruises organization and its highly influential CEO Michael Lazaroff. I was curious about how he and they would run things as compared to my other music charter cruises. And the comedians Alonzo Bowden and George Wallace were of interest to me based on their past work. Thanks to a delay and some poor planning by yours truly, I barely made it to the ship on time. The one advantage to getting there so late was that the lines were minimal and I made it on board in record time. In the cabin I picked up and reviewed my reading materials, the most important of which was this newsletter for the day. I was most intrigued by the 5:45 comedy show and wanted to go. But first was an early dinner or a late lunch at Ocean's, the onboard coffee shop. I had the barbecue chicken wings and a burger. The food was good, especially the wings, but it was too much food for me to digest. Soon after returning to my cabin, I took what I thought would be a short nap. It turned out to be several hours and I missed the show. The next morning I went to breakfast at Ocean's. I had the American breakfast with scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, and potatoes. I was so impressed by this that I had it all 3 days I was on board. With good food and good service, Ocean's was a highlight for me. Then came a Q&A session with fearless leader Michael Lazaroff. He told some interesting stories about the jazz cruise business, enlightened us with more details about current and future sailings, and impressed me with his openness and willingness to answer questions from us. I got up to shake his hand and tell him about my stories. Later on I went to the poolside stage to see a little bit of music director's Marcus Miller's interview with Michael McDonald. I only wandered around for a short time because there were no seats available and I didn't want to stand. The interview sounded interesting, but not interesting enough for me to stick around. In the afternoon, I attended an interview session with comedians Alonzo Bowden and George Wallace. My seat didn't have a good view of the stage, so this was all I saw of George until the end. After the show, Alonzo and George stuck around for selfies, pictures, and autographs and everyone seemed happy. By the way, the interview was hilarious as they interviewed each other and told stories and jokes. Sometime just before this interview, we docked in Nassau. I didn't get off that evening, because I had other plans. Patti LaBelle was performing for us. I got to the theater a half hour early, which seemed to be the sweet spot. There was no line and there were still plenty of good seats. Ms. LaBelle put on a good show for us. She got together with Michael to perform their hit duet On My Own. Of course, she also sung many of her own songs. She had a lot of help from the backing musicians. She had at least a dozen others on stage with her. On the morning of day 3, I finally went outside and into the port. The Carnival legend and MSC Seaside have joined us here. It was a nice day, not cold at all but also not too warm. There was a mix of clouds and sun. I did some work while taking in the scenery thanks to the free internet in the terminal area, then I slowly headed back to the ship. Nassau looked interesting. I wouldn't mind heading back someday. Later on I got the chance to hang out with George Wallace as he told jokes while gambling with play money. He had a fair amount of company but it was never overwhelming. I got a chance to take a selfie with him. He seemed to be very nice. Then came the evening and the highlight of the cruise for many of us, the Michael McDonald concert. I thought he did a very good job. He also had a big group of musicians with him, though not quite as many as Patti LaBelle. He played many of our Doobie Brothers favorites, along with his solo hits and even some Motown. I thought it was a very appealing mix. He did not, however, repeat On My Own from the previous day. Despite some lack of guidance from Norwegian, I got off the ship in record time the next morning as we returned to Miami. Overall I thought the cruise was very short. This I expected. I probably won't take another 3-day cruise unless it's another headliner-based cruise like this one. I also had a very good time meeting and mingling with everyone and listening to all the beautiful music at the concerts. Thank you for watching. Please like this video and subscribe to this channel to be informed of my past and future content about music-themed cruises and my adventures with them.